My mother called me a burden at Thanksgiving dinner while my brother laughed, claiming he was the family's pride. They didn't know I was secretly paying their mortgage. So, I silently stopped the payments, and 3 months later, the foreclosure notice arrived. The silence in my car was heavy, a stark contrast to the chaos inside my head. I sat in the driveway of my parents' house for a full minute, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. It was Thanksgiving, the one day of the year that was supposed to be about gratitude, about coming together. But as I looked at the wreath hanging on the front door, a wreath I had bought them last Christmas because Beverly said the old one looked shabby, I felt a familiar knot of dread tighten in my stomach. I was late, only by 20 minutes, and I had texted, but in this house, 20 minutes was an indictment. I was a senior supply chain director for a major logistics firm. The holiday rush didn't stop just because there was turkey on the table. A shipment in Rotterdam had been flagged by customs, and I had spent the drive over on a conference call, putting out fires that threatened to cost my company millions. I took a deep breath, checked my makeup in the rearview mirror to ensure the stress hadn't cracked the facade, and stepped out into the biting November air. When I opened the front door, the heat hit me first, smelling of sage, roasted poultry, and my mother's overpowering floral perfume. The laughter from the dining room died instantly the moment the latch clicked shut. "She graces us with her presence," Kyle's voice floated out, dripping with that casual, charming sarcasm that everyone else seemed to find endearing. I hung my coat up, steeling myself. "Sorry I'm late," I called out, walking into the dining room. "The Rotterdam Port Authority is a nightmare." "Always an excuse, Claire," Beverly said without looking up from the turkey she was carving. She was dressed impeccably, as always, her gray hair coiffed into a stiff helmet that didn't move when she shook her head. "We held dinner. The rolls are cold." I said I was sorry, Mom. It's my job. It's how I stopped myself. "It's how I pay for this house," I wanted to say, but I didn't. We didn't talk about money. That was the rule. I took my seat across from Kyle. At 26, he still looked like the high school quarterback he had once been, though his face was a little softer now, a little puffier from late nights and too much beer. He was currently pursuing his sound, which meant he was an aspiring DJ who played at local dive bars for drink tickets while living in his childhood bedroom. "So," George said, clearing his throat, "my father looked tired. He always looked tired these days, shrinking into his flannel shirt as if trying to disappear into the upholstery. Glad you made it, kiddo." "Thanks, Dad." "Must be nice," Kyle said, piling mashed potatoes onto his plate. "To just waltz in whenever. Some of us have been helping Mom cook since 6 in the morning." "I was working, Kyle," I said, snapping my napkin into my lap. "Some of us have careers." The table went deadly silent. I knew immediately I had stepped on the landmine. You did not criticize the golden boy. Beverly slammed the carving knife down. The clatter of metal on china made us all jump. "Don't you start," she hissed, her eyes narrowing at me. "Don't you dare come into this house and look down your nose at your brother. He helps us. He is here. He is present." "I'm here now, aren't I?" I argued, my voice rising. "I work hard so I can." "You work hard for yourself," Beverly cut me off, her voice turning venomous. "You always have. You're cold, Claire. You treat this family like a calendar appointment. You come in here with your stress and your phone and your attitude, and honestly, it's exhausting." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Exhausting? Mom, I drove 2 hours." "You are a burden," she said. The words hung in the air, absolute and suffocating. "You act like you're better than us, but you bring nothing but tension. You're just a burden to my spirit. Always have been, always demanding, always difficult." I looked at my father. He was staring at his green beans, refusing to meet my eyes. He wouldn't save me. He never did. Then Kyle laughed. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It was a genuine, amused chuckle. He looked at me, a smirk playing on his lips, and raised his wine glass in a mock toast. "See, Claire," he said, grinning. "You gotta chill. At least I make this family proud. At least people actually like having me around." The world seemed to stop. The hum of the refrigerator, the clink of silverware, the low murmur of the football game on the TV in the other room, it all vanished. All I could hear was the rushing of blood in my ears. A burden, make this family proud. I looked at the turkey, steaming on the platter. I looked at the crystal wine glasses I had bought them for their Annie. Versary. I looked at the expensive heavy-duty napkins I had ordered because Beverly complained the old ones were stained. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. A strange, icy calm washed over me. It was the same calm I felt when a supply chain collapsed and I had to reroute tons of cargo instantly. It was the clarity of a decision made. I carefully placed my fork down on the table. I folded my napkin and set it next to the plate. "Claire," Dad whispered, finally looking up, fear in his eyes. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. "Where are you going?" Beverly demanded, her fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Sit down, do not make a scene." I didn't speak. I turned around and walked out of the dining room. "Claire," Beverly shouted, "if you walk out that door, don't you expect leftovers. You are ruining Thanksgiving." "Let her go, Mom," I heard Kyle say, his mouth full. "More stuffing for us, she's just throwing a tantrum." I walked to the closet, put on my coat, and picked up my purse. My hands were steady. I opened the front door, stepped out into the cold, and closed it behind me with a soft, final click. The betrayal didn't feel like a knife in the back. It felt worse. It felt like I had been carrying a boulder up a mountain for 3 years, breaking my back to keep them safe, only for them to kick me in the chest and ask why I was sweating. The drive back to the city was a blur of interstate lights and dark stretches of forest. For the first hour, I drove in silence. No radio, no podcasts, just the hum of the tires on the asphalt. I was waiting for the tears to come, but they didn't. Instead, I felt a physical sickness, a nausea born of pure, unadulterated rage. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I glanced at it, a text from Beverly. "You are incredibly selfish. Your father is upset. I expect an apology by tomorrow." Then another, "Kyle is right. You need to learn some humility." I let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded foreign to my own ears. Humility. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I pulled into a rest stop, not because I needed to use the restroom, but because my hands had started to shake, and I didn't trust myself to merge onto the bridge ahead. I parked under the harsh, yellow glow of a street lamp and killed the engine. I leaned my head back against the headrest and closed my eyes. The scene played over and over in my mind. You're just a burden. How had we gotten here? I thought about the last 3 years. I thought about the phone call I got when Dad had his minor heart episode that forced him into early retirement. I thought about the panic in Beverly's voice when she realized the hardware store he sold wouldn't net them nearly as much as they thought because of the debts George had hidden. They were going to lose the house. That was the reality 3 years ago. The bank was 2 months away from starting proceedings. I was the one who stepped in. I was the one who sat down with their chaotic pile of bills. I was the one who did the math and realized that between Dad's small Social Security check and Mom's teacher pension, they could buy food and pay utilities, but they couldn't touch the mortgage. "I'll handle it," I had told them. "I'll cover the mortgage until you guys can refinance or downsize." But they never refinanced, they never downsized, and temporarily became indefinitely. I grabbed my phone and unlocked it. I ignored the texts from Beverly and opened my banking app. I navigated to the Scheduled Transfers tab. There it was. Transfer to Chase Mortgage Mom and Dad. Amount, $3,250 frequency, monthly. Next date, Dec 1st. It was November 28th. I stared at the screen. That money was half my disposable income. I drove a 6-year-old sedan so Kyle could drive Dad's truck. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment 40 minutes from my office because rent was cheaper, so they could stay in a 4-bedroom colonial they didn't need. I hadn't taken a vacation in 4 years. "I make this family proud," Kyle had said. Because he was fun. Because he was there to watch football with Dad. Because he told Mom she looked pretty while he ate the food I paid for, under the roof I kept over their heads. They thought the money just appeared. Over time, they had rewritten history. In their minds, Dad's retirement package was robust. In their minds, they were surviving on their own merit. I was just the daughter who lived in the city and thought she was better than them. They had forgotten the most crucial thing in the world. They had forgotten that the burden was actually the pillar holding up the sky. I tapped the line item on my screen. A menu popped up. Edit transfer, skip payment, delete transfer. My thumb hovered over the screen. At least I make this family proud, I whispered to the empty car. If I deleted this, the payment wouldn't go through on the first. The bank would attempt to pull it from their account, which I knew for a fact. T sat at a balance of roughly $400 right now. It would bounce. They would get a letter. But Beverly never opened letters. She stacked them on the counter and waited for the men to handle it or for me to come over and sort them. If I did this, they wouldn't know, not immediately. They would go on eating leftovers and watching TV and praising Kyle. December would pass. January would pass. By the time they realized what was happening, it would be too late to fix it with a simple apology. I pressed delete transfer. A confirmation box popped up. Are you sure? This action cannot be undone. I didn't hesitate. I tapped yes. The line item vanished. I put the phone down and restarted the car. The shaking had stopped. The nausea was gone. As I merged back onto the highway, I turned on the radio. Music filled the car, and for the first time in years, I felt light. To understand why that button press was so nuclear, you have to understand the ecosystem I had just disrupted. My parents weren't evil people, not in the Disney villain sense. They were just profoundly, willfully blind. Beverly was a woman who cared more about appearances than reality. She had been a school administrator for 30 years, used to being the ultimate authority. She curated her life like a museum exhibit. The house had to be perfect, the lawn manicured, the family image sterling. When I was growing up, I was the difficult one because I asked questions. I was the one who wanted to know why we had to pretend we liked the neighbors we hated. I was the one who moved away to the city to study logistics and business, fields Beverly found dull and unladylike. And then there was Kyle. Kyle was the miracle baby, born 6 years after me. He came out smiling and never stopped. He was charming, I'll give him that. He could talk his way out of a parking ticket and talk his way into a VIP section. But charm doesn't pay bills. Kyle had potential. That was the word that hung around his neck like a millstone of gold. He has so much potential as an athlete, Dad said when Kyle quit the varsity team because the coach was too mean. He has so much potential in sales, Mom said when Kyle got fired from the car dealership for showing up late 3 times in a week. He has so much potential as an artist, they both said now. The DJ thing was the latest and most expensive iteration of his potential. A few months ago, I had come home for a weekend to fix their Wi-Fi. I found a brand new, top-of-the-line MacBook Pro and a massive synthesizer setup in the basement. Where did this come from? I had asked, looking at gear that easily cost $5,000. Oh, Kyle needed it for his career, Mom had said, waving a hand dismissively. We dipped a little into the emergency fund. You have to spend money to make money, Claire. You should know that. I had felt like screaming. The emergency fund she was talking about was actually a savings account I had set up for them for medical expenses. I put $200 in it every month. Mom, that money was for Dad's prescriptions if the insurance gap hits, I had argued. Stop being such a miser, she had snapped. Your brother is on the verge of a breakthrough. A club in downtown wants him for a Friday residency. He's going to be huge. Kyle walked in then, wearing a $100 hoodie, holding a craft beer. Jealous, sis, he had smirked. Don't worry. When I'm headlining in Ibiza, I'll buy you a personality. That was the dynamic. Kyle was the dreamer, the star, the fragile genius who needed to be nurtured. I was the utility bill. I was the heavy machinery in the background, necessary, loud, and ugly. But the real antagonist wasn't just Kyle's entitlement, it was Kyle's influence. In the weeks following Thanksgiving, I maintained total radio silence. I didn't answer Beverly's calls. I didn't reply to Dad's texts asking if I was over my mood yet. But I did watch. I watched social media. Kyle was posting constantly. Story update, new setup, thanks to the best parents in the world for believing in the dream. Blessed family first photo, a picture of a new sound mixer. My blood boiled. I knew exactly where that money came from. Since I paid the mortgage, Dad's pension check, which should have gone to the house, was sitting in their checking account. They looked at that balance, saw a surplus, and instead of saving it, they handed it to Kyle. He was bleeding them dry, and they were handing him the knife. Mid-December, I saw a post that made me sit up straight in my office chair. It was a video of Kyle sitting in my father's leather recliner, holding a glass of scotch. "Big things coming," he said to the camera, winking. "Just convinced the investors, aka Mom and Pops, to upgrade the home studio. We're knocking down the wall between the den and the guest room. Soundproofing going in next week. This is gonna be the HQ of the empire." I stared at the screen. The guest room, that was my room, that was where I slept when I visited. He wasn't just taking their money. He was physically erasing my place in the house. And the worst part, he looked so confident. He had the swagger of a man who owned the deed. He had no idea that the investors were technically defaulting on their loan in about, I checked the calendar, 12 days. The bank usually sends a courtesy reminder after 15 days of non-payment. That would have arrived around December 16th. Mom would have ignored it, thinking it was junk mail or a statement. The serious letter, the notice of intent to foreclose, or the 30-day late notice, that would come in January. I zoomed in on the video. In the background, I could see Beverly clapping her hands, looking delighted as Kyle explained his renovation plans. She looked so happy. She looked so proud. "Ask your pride and joy to pay for the drywall," I muttered to the screen. I closed the browser and went back to work. My team was waiting on a logistics report. I had real work to do. I had a mortgage of my own to worry about now. The lease on my apartment was up in 3 months, and I had decided I was going to buy a condo. A nice one. With the $3,250 a month I was suddenly saving, I could afford a place with a view. I was done being the safety net. It was time for gravity to do its job. The holidays passed in a blur of gray skies and silent phone screens. I spent Christmas alone for the first time in my life. I ordered Chinese takeout, watched 3 seasons of a spy thriller, and drank a bottle of wine that cost more than my weekly grocery budget used to. It was lonely, yes, but it was also peaceful. There was no walking on eggshells, no passive-aggressive comments about my weight or my career. On January 15th, the silence broke. I was in a meeting with the VP of Operations, discussing a new distribution lane through Southeast Asia, when my phone vibrated on the mahogany table. Dad. I declined it. 2 minutes later, Dad. I declined again. Then a text, "Claire, call me. Now it's urgent." I finished my presentation, shook hands with the VP, and walked calmly back to my office. I closed the door, poured a glass of water, and sat down. I didn't call him back immediately. I waited 10 minutes. I wanted to be sure my voice was steady. When I finally dialed, he picked up on the first ring. "Claire, God, finally, where have you been?" His voice was thin, reedy, vibrating with a panic I hadn't heard since his heart scare. "I've been working, Dad. What's wrong?" There's been a mistake, a bank error, a massive one." He paused, breathing hard. "We got a letter, certified mail. Beverly had to sign for it. It says we're in default." "Default?" I asked, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. "On what?" "The mortgage, the house. They're saying we missed December and January. They're talking about foreclosure proceedings if we don't pay the full balance plus fees by February 1st. It's nearly $7,000, Claire." That sounds serious, I said. Have you called the bank? Of course I called the bank. They said the auto draft was canceled. Canceled? I told them that's impossible. You handle the technical side of that, right? You set it up on the portal years ago. Did you change something? Did the system crash? He still didn't get it. He truly thought it was a glitch. I didn't change the system, Dad, I said. I canceled the transfer. The silence on the other end was deafening. It stretched for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. You what? I canceled the transfer from my account to yours, in November. But why? Why would you do that? He sounded bewildered, like a child who had been slapped for no reason. Because Mom told me I was a burden, I said, my voice cool and even. She said I've always been a burden, and Kyle said he was the one who made the family proud. I figured a burden shouldn't be paying your mortgage, and if Kyle makes you so proud, surely he can handle the household expenses. Claire, stop it, he snapped, the panic turning into anger. This isn't a game, we're talking about the house, you can't just stop paying without telling us. That's irresponsible. Irresponsible? I let out a sharp laugh. Dad, I've paid over $100,000 toward that house in the last 3 years. I have never asked for a dime back. I was told I was exhausting and selfish. So I removed myself. I'm giving you exactly what you asked for, a life without my influence. Put your mother on the phone. Beverly's voice came from the background, muffled but furious. There was a scuffling sound, and then she was there, loud and screeching. Claire Elizabeth, fix this immediately. Do you hear me? You log into that computer right now and wire the money. They are threatening legal action. I hear you, Mom, but no. What do you mean, no? We don't have that kind of money sitting around. We spent the pension check on the renovation materials for Kyle's studio. That sounds like a choice you made, I said. Maybe Kyle can return the materials. We can't return them. The wall is already down. The contractor has been paid. She was hyperventilating now. How could you be so vindictive? This is your brother's future. This is our home. And I was just a burden, I repeated. I have to go, Mom. I have a meeting. If you hang up, don't you dare come back here, she screamed. I wasn't planning on it. I hung up. My hand was shaking slightly, but not from fear. It was adrenaline. I had done it. I had said the words. But I knew this wasn't over. Beverly wouldn't just accept defeat. She would attack. And she would use her favorite weapon, reputation. I needed to be ready. I logged into my work email and sent a quick message to a friend of mine, David, who worked in forensic accounting. Subject, quick favor. Hey David, remember that favor you owe me for the supply line referral? I need you to look into a business entity for me. Prestige Sound LLC. It's my brother's company. I want to know if it actually exists and if he's filed any taxes in the last 2 years. Just curious. If I was going to war, I wasn't going to bring a knife. I was bringing a dossier. 2 days later, David sent me a PDF. It was short, brutal, and exactly what I expected. Prestige Sound LLC didn't exist. There was no business license, no tax filings, but David had found something else. Public records search on Kyle's name, 3 speeding tickets in the last year, all unpaid, and a small claims court judgment from 6 months ago. A Kyle Miller had been sued by a wedding venue for destruction of property and breach of contract. He owed them $4,500. I printed the documents. That evening, I was cooking dinner when my doorbell rang. It was insistent. Ding, 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 ding. I checked the peephole. It was Kyle. I opened the door. He looked disheveled. He was wearing his expensive leather jacket, but he looked like he hadn't slept. What the hell is wrong with you? He demanded, pushing past me into my apartment. He didn't take off his shoes. Nice to see you too, Kyle. Shoes off, please. He ignored me, pacing around my small living room, looking at my furniture with disdain. Mom is a wreck. Dad is talking about selling his truck. Do you have any idea what you're doing to them? I'm doing nothing to them, I said, leaning against the kitchen counter. I'm simply not doing everything for them anymore. You're punishing them because your feelings got hurt, he sneered, turning to face me. You're so petty. You always have been. You think because you have a corporate job you can control everyone with money. It's not control, Kyle. It's arithmetic. I paid the bills, they insulted me. I stopped paying the bills. It's a very simple equation. Well, fix it, he commanded. Write them a check, get them current. Then we can talk about an apology. No. He laughed, a harsh, barking sound. You think you're tough. You think you can just watch them lose the house. You won't do it. You're too desperate for their approval. I used to be, I admitted. But then I realized something at Thanksgiving. You're the pride and joy, right? You're the one making them proud. I walked over to the side table and picked up the folder containing David's findings. I did a little digging, Kyle, since you're such a big-time entrepreneur. I tossed the folder onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy slap. What's this? That is a record of your business, or lack thereof, and that judgment against you from the wedding venue, the one where you got drunk and knocked over the speaker system. His face went pale. That was an accident. They were trying to screw me over. Did Mom and Dad know about that? Or did you tell them you needed $4,500 for equipment upgrades to pay it off? His eyes darted around the room. I had hit the bullseye. You're crazy, he stammered. You're stalking me. And the speeding tickets? Does Dad know you're driving his truck with a suspended license? Because if you get pulled over, they impound the vehicle, his truck, his asset. Shut up, he shouted. You don't know anything. I know that you have zero income, I said, stepping closer. I know that you're bleeding them dry, and now that my money is gone, the well is dry, Kyle. There's nothing left to steal. So here is what is going to happen. You are going to leave my apartment, and you are going to go home and tell them the truth. Tell them you can't help. Tell them you have no money. I'm not telling them anything, he spat. You're going to pay. Because if you don't, I'll tell everyone in the family that you abandoned your sick father. I'll post it everywhere. I'll ruin you. Go ahead, I said calmly. Post it, see what happens. He stared at me, his fists clenched, searching for the weakness he had exploited for my entire life. He couldn't find it. You're a witch, he muttered. Ghetto. What? He slammed the door so hard a picture frame on my wall tilted. I straightened it. My heart was pounding, but I didn't feel fear. I felt clarity. He was scared. He was cornered, and cornered animals bite. I needed to protect my parents, even if they hated me for it. I couldn't just let the house foreclose. I needed a way to save the asset without saving the parasite. The next week was a masterclass in manipulation. Kyle didn't post anything public. He was smarter than that. Instead, the flying monkeys arrived. My Aunt Linda called. Claire, your mother is in the hospital. Her blood pressure is through the roof. The doctor says it's stress. How can you be so cruel? My cousin Mike texted. Hearing some crazy stuff about you cutting off your folks. Not cool, Claire. Family is family. Beverly had spun the narrative. In her version, I had embezzled their money. I had promised to manage their finances and then stolen the mortgage payments for myself. It was a lie so bold it took my breath away. I went to see a lawyer, not for them, for me. I need to know my options, I told Mrs. Higgins, a sharp-eyed woman who specialized in elder law and estate planning. My parents are being financially abused by my brother, but they are willing participants. They are about to lose their home. If their names are on the deed, they can do what they want, Mrs. Higgins said, reviewing the file. However, if you step in to save the house, you can demand leverage. You can buy the mortgage note, or you can demand a quitclaim deed in exchange for paying the arrears. I don't want the house, I said. I just don't want them on the street, and I want him out. Then you need a conditional bailout, she said. You pay the arrears, but only if they sign a contract. The contract states that the brother must vacate the premises, and the house is put on the market immediately to downsize. If they refuse, you walk away. They'll never sign it, I said. They worship him. They will when the sheriff shows up with an eviction notice, Mrs. Higgins replied. Fear is a powerful motivator. but you need proof of the brother's financial abuse to show the father. The mother is a lost cause, but the father, he might listen if the numbers are stark enough. I needed more than the court judgment. I needed to show where the money went. I called Dad. He didn't answer. I left a voicemail. Dad, I'm coming over on Sunday. I'm bringing pizza. We need to look at the bank statements together, just you and me, please. He texted back one word, okay. Sunday came, I drove to the house. The lawn looked neglected. The wreath was gone from the door. When I walked in, the atmosphere was funereal. The drywall in the hallway was torn down, exposing the studs, Kyle's half-finished studio renovation. It looked like a bomb had gone off. Dust was everywhere. Beverly was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a stack of bills. She didn't look up. "You have some nerve," she whispered. "Where's Kyle?" I asked. "He's out, looking for work," she lied. "He's at the bar, Mom. I saw his location on Snap Map," I said, putting the pizza on the counter. "Dad, come here." George shuffled into the kitchen. He looked 10 years older. "I have a proposal," I said, opening my laptop. "I have spoken to the bank. I am willing to pay the $7,200 in arrears immediately. I will stop the foreclosure." Dad let out a sob of relief. "Oh, thank God, Claire. I knew you wouldn't do this to us." Beverly sat up straighter, a smug look returning to her face. "Well, it's about time you came to your senses." "However," I said, raising a hand, "there are conditions, strict ones." "Conditions?" Beverly narrowed her eyes. "1, the house goes on the market next week. You cannot afford this place. You need a condo. I will help you find one." "We are not selling our home," Beverly shouted. 2, I continued, ignoring her. "Kyle moves out. Today, he is an adult. He needs to support himself. You can't kick out your brother." "And 3, I said, turning the laptop screen toward Dad, "you need to see this." I had pulled up a spreadsheet. I had gained access to their joint checking account online. I still had the password from when I set it up. I had categorized every withdrawal from the last 12 months. "Dad, look at the red column. That's cash withdrawals and transfers to Kyle. Look at the total." He squinted at the screen. $24,000, he whispered. "That's your pension, Dad. That's the money that should have paid the grocery bill, the electric bill, the taxes. It's all gone to him, for equipment, for investments. And here," I clicked on another tab, "here is the court record where he was sued for destroying property at a wedding. He told you he needed $4,500 for a new mixer. He used it to pay a legal judgment." Dad looked at the screen, then at Beverly. "Bev, did you know about this?" Beverly's face flushed. He made a mistake. He was protecting his reputation. He's a good boy, George. "He's a liar, Dad," I said softly. "And he's eating you alive. If I pay the mortgage today and he stays here, he will drain you again next month. And I won't be here to fix it. This is a one-time offer. He goes or the house goes." The front door slammed open. "What is going on here?" Kyle's voice boomed. He walked into the kitchen, smelling of stale beer and expensive cologne. "I see the traitor is back." "She's making demands," Beverly cried, standing up and rushing to him. "She wants to kick you out. She wants us to sell the house." Kyle laughed, that same arrogant laugh from Thanksgiving. He looked at me with pure contempt. "You're pathetic," he said. "You think you can come in here and wave your checkbook and boss us around? Dad isn't going to sign anything. Are you, Dad?" He walked over to George and clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Tell her to get lost, Pop. We'll figure this out. I've got a gig coming up. Big money." George looked at the hand on his shoulder. He looked at the spreadsheet on the screen. He looked at the half-demolished wall in the hallway. The silence stretched, thin and brittle. Then, for the first time in my life, George brushed Kyle's hand off his shoulder. "A gig?" Dad asked, his voice trembling. "Like the one where you destroyed the speakers?" Kyle froze. "Or the one where you needed $5,000 for a mixer that doesn't exist?" Dad stood up. He wasn't a tall man, but in that moment, he looked significant. "Dad, don't listen to her lies." "They aren't lies, Kyle." Dad shouted, slamming his hand on the table. The numbers are right here. You took my pension, you took everything. George, Beverly gasped. Stop it, you're upsetting him. I'm upsetting him? Dad turned on her, his face red. We are losing our house, Beverly, because of him, and because of you letting him. He turned to me, his eyes were wet. Where is the paper, Claire? Where do I sign? The house sale was a sprint, not a marathon. With the foreclosure clock ticking, we had to move fast. Mrs. Higgins drafted the agreement. I paid the arrears, the house went on the market immediately, and any profit from the sale, after paying me back, would go into a trust for my parents' new condo, controlled by a third party. Kyle got nothing. He had 30 days to vacate. But Beverly, being Beverly, couldn't just leave quietly. She couldn't admit defeat. She decided to control the narrative one last time. She threw a party. A Bon Voyage Gala, she called it in the Facebook invite. Join us as George and I embark on our next great adventure, downsizing for a life of travel and leisure. It was delusional. They weren't traveling. They were moving to a 2-bedroom ground floor unit in a complex 3 towns over because it was all they could afford. But she invited everyone, Aunt Linda, Cousin Mike, the neighbors, the church group. I didn't want to go. The thought of watching them play-act success while the movers were scheduled for Monday made my stomach turn. But Dad asked me to be there. I need you in my corner, Claire, he had said, his voice trembling, just in case he starts something. So that Saturday, I walked back into the house. It was surreal. The boxes were shoved into the garage to hide the reality of the move. The living room was staged with appetizers. Beverly was wearing her best pearls, holding a glass of champagne, holding court in the center of the room. Oh, yes, she was saying to Mrs. Gable from next door. We just realized the house was too big. We want to be free to visit Europe. George has always wanted to see Italy. George was standing in the corner, clutching a sparkling water, looking like he wanted to sink into the floor. And then there was Kyle. He was working the room like a politician. He was dressed in a suit I knew he had bought with Dad's money. He was charming the aunts, refilling drinks, playing the role of the dutiful son helping his aging parents transition. Yeah, it's a big change, I heard him tell Uncle Bob. But I'm looking at this as an opportunity. I'm thinking of moving my studio to the city. Actually, Bob, I was hoping to pick your brain about some investment capital. My blood ran cold. He wasn't stopping. He was actively hunting for his next host. Uncle Bob was a soft touch, a retired mechanic with a nice nest egg. I walked over. Hello, Uncle Bob, I said, stepping between them. Claire, Bob smiled. We were just talking about your brother's big plans. Sounds like he's really taking off. Is that right? I looked at Kyle. His smile faltered just for a second before reattaching itself. Just talking shop, sis, Kyle said, his voice tight. Why don't you go help Mom with the hors d'oeuvres? Actually, Bob, I said, ignoring Kyle, you should be careful with those investments. You know Kyle is currently dealing with some legal overhead. Claire, Kyle warned, his voice drow. Peeping to a growl, don't. Legal overhead, Bob looked confused. Like patents. Like judgments, I said loud enough for the nearby circle to hear. For destroying property and fraud. The chatter in the room dipped. Beverly's head snapped toward us. Claire, she shrilled, rushing over. Stop this. This is a celebration. It's not a celebration, Mom, I said, and my voice carried. The room went silent. It's a rescue mission. You aren't going to Europe. You're going to a condo because you're broke. Because you let him spend every dime you had. That is enough, Beverly screamed. She was shaking. Get out, you are ruining everything. I'm saving Uncle Bob, I said calmly, and I'm saving the rest of you. I turned to the room. The neighbors, the family, the church friends, they were all staring, their drinks halfway to their mouths. My parents aren't retiring in luxury, I announced. They are selling this house to avoid foreclosure. Because Kyle spent their pension on audio equipment and lawsuits, so if he asks you for money tonight, keep your wallets closed. She's lying, Kyle shouted. He stepped forward, his face twisting into an ugly snarl. She's jealous. She's always been jealous of me. She's trying to cut me out of the will. There is no will, Kyle, I shouted back. There is nothing left to leave, you ate it all. Kyle lunged at me. It was a clumsy, desperate move, fueled by humiliation. But before he could reach me, a hand grabbed his collar and jerked him back. It was Dad. George, the man who had spent his life avoiding conflict, the man who hid in his chair, had grabbed his son by the lapels of his expensive suit and shoved him against the wall. A picture frame, a photo of Kyle's high school graduation, rattled and fell to the floor, shattering. "Don't you touch her," Dad said. His voice wasn't loud, but it was terrifying. It was the voice of a man who had nothing left to lose. "You don't touch her. You don't speak to her. You are done." "Dad," Kyle gasped, looking at him with wide, shocked eyes. "Dad, it's me. It's Kyle." "I know who you are," Dad said, tears streaming down his face. "You're the mistake I made. I let you think you were a king, and you became a thief." He let go of Kyle, who slumped against the wall. Dad turned to the room. He looked at his friends, his neighbors, his family. He straightened his flannel shirt. "The party is over," George said. "Please go home. We have packing to do." No one said a word. The silence was absolute. Slowly, people began to set down their glasses. They gathered their coats. They filed out the door, casting pitying glances at Beverly, who was sobbing into her hands in the center of the room. Kyle stood alone by the wall, the shattered glass of his graduation photo at his feet. He looked small. He looked ordinary. The golden light was gone. I looked at him one last time. "Pack your bags, Kyle. The movers are coming at 8:00 a.m. If you aren't out, the sheriff removes you." I walked over to Dad, took his hand and squeezed it. He squeezed back hard. The fallout was swift and absolute. Kyle didn't leave voluntarily. On moving day, he locked himself in his room. True to her word, Mrs. Higgins had the sheriff on standby. Watching my brother be escorted out of the house in handcuffs for trespassing, screaming that he had tenant rights, was a grim spectacle. But it was necessary. He ended up crashing on a friend's couch for 2 weeks until the friend got tired of him. The last I heard, he was working at a car wash in the next county, living in a rented room above a garage. The Prestige Sound LLC dream was dead. The wedding venue garnished his wages the moment he got a legitimate paycheck. Reality, it turned out, was a debt collector that always found you. My parents moved into the condo. It was small, but it was clean. It was safe. The relationship with Beverly was broken, perhaps permanently. She blamed me for the humiliation of the party. She blamed me for destroying Kyle. We didn't talk much. When I visited, she would sit in her chair, staring out the window, nursing a bitterness that would likely outlive her. I accepted that. I wasn't looking for her approval anymore. I didn't need to be her favorite. But Dad was different. A month after the move, I drove out to see them. I found Dad on the small patio of the condo, tending to a tomato plant in a pot. He looked better. The dark circles were gone. He had lost the hunted look he'd worn for years. "Hey, kiddo," he said, standing up to hug me. "Hey, Dad, how's the tomato crop?" "Coming along," he smiled. "It's not the big garden, but it's enough." We sat in the plastic patio chairs, watching the sun go down over the parking lot. "I wanted to give you this," he said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a check. I looked at it. It was for $3,250. "Dad, you don't have to." "I do," he interrupted. "It's the first month's surplus from the pension. Now now that the expenses are down, I want to pay you back every cent. It might take me until I'm 90, but I'm going to pay you back." I looked at his hands, calloused and shaking slightly. I looked at the check. I knew he needed this for his dignity. He needed to be the father again. "Okay," I said, taking it. "Thank you, Dad." He nodded, looking out at the sunset. "I'm sorry, Claire, for everything, for not seeing it, for making you carry it." "It's okay, Dad. We're here now." "You were right," he said softly. "About the pride. I was proud of the wrong things, I was proud of the image, but when the walls came down, you were the only one standing there holding the hammer and the nails. He looked at me, his eyes clear. You're the one who makes me proud, Claire, you always were. I felt a lump in my throat, hot and tight. I reached out and took his hand. We sat there in silence as the streetlights flickered on. I drove home that night with the windows down. The air smelled of spring rain. I thought about the burden my mother had named me. I realized she was right in a way. I was a burden. I was the weight of reality. I was the anchor that kept the ship from drifting into the rocks. Anchors are heavy. Anchors are hard to move, but without them, you're lost at sea. I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment complex. I looked up at the building. Next week, I was closing on my own place, a condo downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the river. It was mine, paid for with my salary, secured with my credit. I walked up the stairs, unlocking my door. I was tired, but it was a good tired. It was the exhaustion of a job well done. I wasn't a burden, I was the foundation. And for the first time in my life, I was building something just for me.